James Toney, who was once the International Federation middleweight boxing champ, was pictured on the cover of Sports Illustrated. And they were asking him why he was such a tenacious boxer. I want you to listen to his words. He said this: "I fight with anger. My dad, he did my mom wrong. He made my mom work 2 jobs and he left his responsibilities behind, and I can never forgive that. I hope my father reads this article, because if he ever decides to come out of the woodwork, I'll be ready for him. Everything I do in the ring is about that. I look at my opponent and I see my dad, so I have to take him out. I'll do anything I have to do to get my dad out of there." Whoa. You feel incredible pain there, don't you? Because, you know, without a dad, a son's life has a vacuum in it. And part of what fills that vacuum is rage. And it's a kind of rage that he doesn't fully understand. But he goes out into life with it. And he wants to blame somebody for it. But he's not sure who to blame. But he hurts a lot of people. That comes from the absent father wound. Here's a second thing that comes from it: extreme behaviors, specifically addictions or obsessions. You know, anger is one way a son expresses that pain. But addictions is a way you suppress the pain. You numb out. So when you have this big hole in your heart that you don't know what to do with, that should have been filled by a parent who loved you and cared for you, then it's easy to fall subject to things like drugs and alcohol. And guys, listen, pornography and sex. Because all those are ways of numbing a pain that a man doesn't understand. That's why it's so important in the first step of manhood to look back, because sometimes we find ourselves locked into behaviors and addictions we don't understand. But if we could find the root, if we could go back and finally unlock the last door, what would be there would be the fact that we grew up alone. And part of the hurt in that and the frustration that began to mount through the years because of that, it became so painful. Rather than getting mad at everybody, we decided another alternative was just to numb out. And so we party. But part of the partying is to numb out the pain. Or we take drugs. Or we get on the internet and we live in a dream world. The dream world of pornography, where we can engage in a pleasurable way someone else, but without commitments, without any investment. It's just a narcotic to feel good for the moment. Sometimes we fall into what I call obsessive behaviors because of an unhealthy relationship with Dad. It's a way of resolving the pain, but it really doesn't. We are driven to win Dad's approval. Even after we've left home, or we are going to show Dad that I'm good enough so you'll notice me. So we become the workaholic, or we become achievement crazy. We become the wow man. Some way to get Dad to notice me, to make Dad proud of me, to make Dad love me. Those are obsessive behaviors. And we're not really in contact with why we're driven. But way back at the root, there's a desire to be noticed and affirmed, an affirmation we never received. So extreme behaviors like addictions or obsessions. A third thing that's kind of a symptom of the absent father is an inner sense of lostness or incompleteness. Maybe we're not involved in those kind of extreme expressions, but inside we just feel weightless, lost. There's something just missing. There's just a missing piece, and we feel it. Burt Reynolds feels that. And he was able to trace it back to his dad. He was interviewed in Parade magazine, and he made this statement. He said this: My dad was the chief of police. That's interesting, isn't it? We're going to hear his story. Remember, everybody has a story. Here's his story. My dad was the chief of police, and when he came into a room, all the light in the air went out of it. There's a saying in the South, no man is a man until his father tells him he is. It means that someday when you're 30 or 40 grown up, this man whom you respect and love and you want to love, you hope he'll put his arms around you and say, you know, you're a man now. And you don't have to do all those crazy things that you're doing and get into fistfights and all that to defend your honor. You don't have to prove anything to me. You're a man and I love you. But with my dad and me, we never hugged and we never kissed and we never said, I love you. No, we never even cried together. Reynolds paused for a moment and then said these words. So what happened was that later I was desperately looking for someone who would say, Bert, you're grown up now and I approve of you and I love you and you don't have to do these things anymore. But that didn't happen. And I was lost inside. For most of my life, I couldn't connect. I was incomplete. And I didn't know then what I needed to know now. And that's how a lot of men feel. And they don't know why. A fourth symptom of the absent father wound is homosexuality. Homosexuality. Listen carefully to these words by Dr. Elizabeth Moberly of Oxford University. In her study on homosexuality, she concluded that homosexuality, for the most part, and these are her words, and I quote, it is a fracture of the relationship with the parent of the same sex. Homosexuality then becomes, at an adult level, a vain, eroticized attempt to recover from that fracture. You know, my older brother, Charles, the one who was the Navy veteran, the artist, the smart one, the sensitive one, he struggled desperately with Dad. And he suffered that fracture. Moberly goes on and says, much, if not all, of homosexuality depends on difficulties in the parent-child relationship, especially in the early years of life. The homosexual, whether a man or a woman, has suffered from some deficit in the relationship with the parent of the same sex, and later there is a corresponding drive to make good that deficit through the medium of same-sex homosexual relationships as an adult. It was after my brother graduated from law school and went to work for an oil company that he came out. But having grown up with him and having known him, it's real clear to me that Moberly is right on track here. It creates this fissure, this psychic fissure that you want to recover from, but can't. Or at least it's incredibly difficult. But that's part of the absent father wound. So what is it that every son wants and needs from his father? Can I give you 5 things? 5 things I think that every son wants and needs from his father. Here's the first one. Time together. Just time together. Time that results in experiences that build kind of lifelong, positive memories. Because that's like putting weight into a son's soul. It steadies him for life. And he can't drift when he's steadied because of these positive lifelong memories. When you look back over your life, it's memories that are the markers of life and give weight to life. And I've discovered that with my own sons. It's not taking them necessarily to play for an AAU basketball team or tennis team so much. I mean, it's great to have them involved in sports, but what I'm talking about is going out on a Sunday afternoon and playing imaginary football with them. Just throwing the ball around, pretending you're in some big game. And in that experience, there's something that's just pure joy that takes place. It's going out, just taking a walk together, climbing a mountain together, or taking a special trip together. Just me and Dad. That's what he's thinking. Just me and Dad. And it's fun, and you can build all kinds of imagination into that, but what you're really building is lifelong memories with a father that you want and desperately need to connect with. And that's what a son wants from you, Dad. He doesn't just want things, he wants you. Time together with you. Because ultimately, good fathering is these wonderful memories together. Secondly, he needs life skills. Life skills. Here's the way it says it in Proverbs 22:6. It says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. And it's speaking of training up a child in the way he should go. That's adequacy. When he's old, he won't depart from it. You know why he won't depart from it? Because it'll make sense. He'll win in life. He won't be standing around when the hood's up, looking at the motor, wondering what it is. He'll know where the oil stick is, and he'll know how to measure the oil. He'll know how to check his tires. He'll know how to tie his tie. He won't be standing there with the guys in the dorm saying, could you help me tie my tie? And everybody laughing at him. He'll know how to write out a checkbook and keep up with his account. He'll know how to set his own alarm and get up for himself. He'll know how to keep his room clean. He'll know what to do when he and his date walk up to the door. He'll know what they need to do when they gather around the dinner table, when she goes to sit down. He'll know how to share his heart. He won't feel like a fool in life because you've trained him up in the way he should go. And that verse also speaks to the issue of being sensitive to your child's bent. It says, train up a child according to his bent, because every child has a certain bent. So the dad recognizes what that bent is. He doesn't make an artist an athlete. He honors his ability to be an artist. Or the son who's really good at science, and he never was. He honors that and says, let me help you craft a path that'll help you maximize that gifting that you have. That's life skills. And every son wants that from his dad. So when he looks back, he says, you know, my dad helped me get here. And it feels good. Third, every son wants from his dad direction with solid why answers. Not just life skills, but he wants from dad a philosophy about what life is all about. He wants to interact with dad over that. And that's what Deuteronomy encourages dads to do with their sons. Look what Deuteronomy 6 says. It says, in these words which I am commanding, God is saying I'm commanding you today, said, you take these words and they shall be on your heart, Dad, and you shall teach them to your sons and shall talk of them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way and when you lie down and when you rise up. You're talking to your son about life and what's really important about life. Remember, I told you that a lot of dads, they'll be around their son. We've got some new fathering going on here in the 21st century, and it's good stuff in the sense that dad's more involved with his son's life. But a lot of times it's being around his son, attending his games, or helping him with his homework. But this verse is going beyond that to the higher things of life. And that is, what is life about? What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a man with a woman? What happens to you when you die? That's the kind of things dad needs to be talking to his son about when they lie down and rise up and when they walk through the day, and pointing out that because it's adding weight to the son's life. Fourthly, a son needs from his dad convictions through modeling. You can write this down because I think this is an important phrase. You will leave in your son what you've lived out in your home. It's not just what you say, it's what you do. It's the way you react. And the Son sees that, and that builds conviction, a certain security about life. Here's the way Paul says it in 1 Thessalonians. He uses this statement of fathering to even talk about spiritual fathering, but he says it this way: you are witnesses, and so is God, how devoutly and uprightly and blamelessly we behave towards you believers. That is, you saw our convictions, just as you know how we were exhorting and encouraging and imploring each one of you as a father would his own children. Well, hopefully a father would his own children. But see, what a father implores and exhorts his own children with is his convictions. And the child sees those convictions and hears those words, and it makes sense. And when you take convictions and modeling and words together, how you're living and what you're saying, and you put those together, you know what you call that? Integrity. Integration. And it's easy to follow that and want to be like that because you see the success of that. That's what every child needs. But most of all, here's what every son needs. Number 5, Dad's heart. Dad's heart. Every son needs to be loved by Dad and affirmed by Dad and blessed by Dad. In fact, Dad, if you're a dad here today, there are 3 things you better be sure your son leaves home with. And if you're a son here today and you haven't heard these words, we'll talk about this next week. These are the kind of things you still want to hear. But every son needs to hear from his dad these 3 things. I love you, I'm proud of you, and you're good at something. That's the blessing. Son, I love you. He hears those words from your lips. And those of us who grew up and didn't hear that, long to hear that. I've stood over my dad's grave and wish he could have come out of the grave and said those words to me. I would still love to hear that. I'm proud of you. There's nothing that gives weight to a son than to have his dad put his arm around him, look him down and say, son, I am so proud of you. And then every son loves to hear his dad say, you're good at something. Some of us have incredible memories where Dad just reached over and grabbed our leg and said, you are an unbelievable receiver. Or you're one of the smartest guys I know. There's nothing that motivates like that, is there, guys? Every son needs that. You know what's interesting? You can look in the Bible and you look at Jesus Christ and you think, here's Jesus Christ. He didn't need anything. Oh, yeah, he did. He was a man too. And did you know over and over again, at critical moments in Jesus' life, heaven opened up and God, his Father, did those 3 things for him. Look for just a moment at Matthew 17:5 and you see that. Here's a critical moment in Jesus' life, and the heavens open up and these words are spoken. This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. Now, what do you see in that? You see, this is my beloved Son. Son, I love you. Here, it was a critical moment in Jesus' ministry, and heaven opened up, and the Father said, I love you. Then he says, in whom I'm well pleased. I'm proud of you. And then he tells the disciples around Jesus, listen to him, because he's really good. He's really good. And I want you to know every son needs that kind of blessing from Dad. And if a son doesn't get time with his dad or some life skills or some direction, some convictions or some heart, then it leaves this huge vacuum and void and wound in his life. And that's why writer Gordon Dalby made this observation about men in America. He says, I've observed that inside most every business suit, most every pair of faded overalls, most every stay-pressed sports shirt, lies the wounded heart of a boy longing for his daddy. A number of years ago, Dan Gerald, who used to be one of the pastors here at Fellowship and now is in Alaska, was talking about these 3 essentials between a father and his son and how important they were. And if you didn't have those, how you still long for those things. And after the talk, a man came up and just slipped Dan a little note. And after the talk was over, when he got back to his hotel room, he opened up the note that he had, and these are the words that it said. Dear Dan, my father was killed in World War II when I was 3 years old. I knew in my heart that he loved me. My mother told me that he loved me, but I always longed to hear it for myself from him. When my mother and stepfather retired and left Alaska, I came over one day to help them pack. Mom took an old Army photograph of my father in his Army uniform off of her dresser and gave it to me, and she said, "Here, this is for you. I know your father would have wanted you to have it." It was the same photograph I had seen for many years. As I took the picture from her, I accidentally dropped it, and the cheap metal frame hit the floor and broke, shattering the glass. Sick at heart, I reached down to salvage what was left of this family treasure. But behind the photograph, I found a letter, placed there 37 years before and long since forgotten. It was a letter from my father to me, his 3-year-old son. The last letter he had written before he died. And in it he said that he loved me and that he longed to come home and be with me. Unbelievably, I finally heard the words that I had longed to hear from a dad who was long since dead. Every one of us wants that. We were created for that, to be blessed by Dad. And when we don't have that, it leaves a wound. Why did this man need to hear his father say, "I love you"? And why was he so excited to share it with Dan? Because the glory of sons is their fathers. Why is it that at the end of a day, a man comes home and opens the door to his house, and his young 3-year-old comes running, screaming, yelling with joy on his face and jumps into his daddy's arms? Because the glory of sons is their fathers. Why is it that there's a 40-year-old man sitting in a hotel room, and he's angry, and he weeps, and he has a hole in his heart? Because the glory of sons is their dads. That's why. For many of us, remembering Dad can be emotional whitewater. And let me tell you guys, I know that. And I'm with you. This is a safe place here. It can be emotional whitewater, but you know what? It's good to go there and learn and heal. And we're just cracking that open here today. It's good to go there. It's not necessarily good to stay there, but it's good to go there. And that's why I wanted to bring you there today and start your journey of looking back at the root. Now, what we're going to do next week is move on from there. We're going to take all of what I've said today and we're going to wrap it up. And for those of us who have a wound, we're going to talk about how to heal that wound and how to break free from it. That's next week.